Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another DC comic review. And this time I'll be reviewing Superman issue 32, and I'll also be showing the variants when I do that review, and I will also be rating those variants. Action Comic Superman 1032. And last but not least, Detective Comics Batman 1038, or 1038. So, time to get to it. Starting off with first things first, I'll be moving into Superman issue 32. Okay, so now it's time to begin. Starting off with issue 32. The ratings for, well, each cover. And I must admit, some of these covers are okay. The other one, even though it doesn't quite fit the story, I still decided to rate it anyway. So starting off with the regular one, the regular trade dress, I gave it an 8 out of 10, as yes, it did actually feel like it suited what was happening within the story. Moving to the second one, which is on the right hand side, I must admit, this is one of my favourite covers that have actually come out this month, out of the variants. And this is why I specifically asked for it through my LCS, or my local comic store, because of what that picture has. And in it, yes, it does actually come across in the story. We still have Superman doing his narration, and it works with the story, and it's sort of like what Superman is trying to pass on to John. Like, should the time happen that he happens to go and disappear, or ends up dying, at least he's got someone to pass his legacy on to. And that would be John Samuel Kent, who we still really want de-aged back. And now Super Son's back. Moving into the Pride variant. Lovely picture, but I'm afraid it's a 6.5 out of 10. Alright, now that I'm done there, it's time to move into the internal art for its rating, before I move into rating the story. So, move into rating the story, we'll move into rating the art, looking at the art around the beginning of the story, middle and the end. I will not be covering the additional backstory. Now, this is some of the art, and we're back to the planet of Fakram with the Fakram species, and also dealing with the issue of the Shadow Breed. This is art around the beginning. I'll now move to the middle. This is some of the art around the middle. And now I'll move to the end. And this is around the end of the story. For this, I gave the internal art 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time for the story rating. Now moving into the story rating. Now, as you know, I like certain things that help bring out the story. So let's start off with the first point. Was there any indication of when this takes place time-wise? No, not at all. And that, I'm afraid, does affect the score. What about comic references? it wouldn't have hurt to included it. It wasn't there. So in that, once again, points lost. Moving into location. Well, if it wasn't for one of the species mentioning where the location was, but it still wouldn't hurt to include it in like visual sense for any new readers. Of course, the location is Fakrum. Moving into the cast of characters, we had Superboy. We also encountered Gareth Gareth Baracus, something like that. And he ended up doing something to try to help him out. Then, of course, Superman sort of like came later on within the story, which also leads to Fowler Pornim, who is a part of the Fakrum species, but has been a little bit misled by the Shadow Breed within this story run. And also you get to see Superman as well as Superboy help out within the story. But how do we go for the story rating here? I'm afraid it's a 6.5 out of 10 here. I was really expecting some of these missing details to be included in the story, and surprisingly they weren't. There were some lovely pictures though, and I will point that out, but there was also just those missing points that could make the story better. Well, I'll just pause it right here, and I'll get things ready for reviewing Superman Action Comics 1032 of what's happening there. Now it's time to move into Action Comics Superman issue 1032. Now, time to get straight into the cover rating. Does this cover in any way, shape or form indicate something that happens within the story? Surprisingly it does, and I gave the cover a 7 out of 10. Time to move into the internal art, to which I'll be covering once again the beginning, middle and end in regards to the stories, and as I pointed out before, I will not be covering the backstory. Now this is some of the art around the beginning, to which we actually learn one of the name of Mongol's prisoners, who is now with Superman. This is some of the art around the middle. And I must admit, there is something very interesting that is happening here with this. I'm going to say it just for this comic review alone, this particular kaiju, as you can see, there's certain lines and indications here. And if you look further within the story, you get to see something that looks like, or looks very similar to the Superman sigil, or the Superman S. And this is both Superman and Aquaman going up against this particular kaiju. I'll just point out that scene that I was just talking about before. And last but not least, some art towards the end. For this, I gave the art 7.5 out of 10. So moving into the story, as you know, I like to enjoy certain things within my story. So we'll start off with the first thing. Did we get any comic references? Like, is there something that Philip Kennedy Johnson might want us to go back to see what he's actually pointing out, of maybe important things that the reader might need to know? Surprisingly, no, but did it affect the story that much? We'll soon find out when it gets to the racing. Time. Did we get any time references as to when it takes place? None at all. Locations. Again, it still would be nice if it was a little bit more clearer in regards to the locations pointed out within the story, because you're going to have people who might read this story, might not even know about Kryptonians, might not even know about the Fortress of Solitude, let alone Atlantis in the DC universe. They might see it be brought up by name, but they're also going to need the confirmation. So we did get those locations, the Fortress of Solitude and Atlantis. But they weren't pointed out clearly. But moving into the cast of characters, we of course get Superman, Kelex, to which actually something happens to Kelex in this. We had Supergirl and Lois who were talking together in the beginning. Then we finally get the name of one of Mongol's victims, to which Superman was talking to, and her name is Tao Li, spelled Thao hyphen Li, or Tao Lao. Of course, we had Superboy make his appearance. We had Batman. We of course had Aquaman, and even Steve Trevor at the end there. To which, of course, as you saw within the visuals that were shared, that there seems to be a little bit of a mystery, not only behind this kaiju, but also this strange equipment that has landed on planet Earth, which Superman also lives and inhabits on. And it's going to be interesting to see how the story will come out with that. I hope he doesn't lead us on a wild goose chase in regards to what Bendis did with a lot of his storytelling. And normally with the wild goose chases that Bendis did, they ended up coming to nothing. And we don't want to see that. We actually want to see a fully good, wholesome, encompassing story. So for the story rating, I gave it a 7 out of 10. So a big improvement in this. Even though it still missed those elements, I did in fact enjoy certain parts of this story. Time to move on to Detective Comics Batman. Last but not least, it's time for the review for Detective Comics Batman by Mariko Tamaki. Now, starting off with the cover rating, how does this cover work in relation to the story? Well, in part it actually does, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. Because you do actually get to see Batman as well as Huntress in some part work together within the story. So, time to move into the internal art, which you'll get to see the beginning, middle and end. I want to point out once again, I will not be covering the backstory in this, even though I did actually seem to enjoy the backstory more than this story. Even though it was very short, it wasn't even written by Mariko Tamaki, I seem to enjoy it more than this story. Time to get to the art. Now, this is some of the art around the middle, the beginning, correction there. I'll now move to the middle. In this, we have Mr. Worth, Penguin. I think that's Simon Say. I might be incorrect there. And now to move towards the end. Okay, of course, moving towards the end. To which I've given this art 7 out of 10. I did quite enjoy it. So what about the story rating? Okay, moving into the story. Starting off with first things first. Did this comic provide any comic references? Actually, surprisingly, it did. It actually gave the comic reference back to 1036, which was really nice. Moving into locations. In it, we got the underground. We also ended up visiting and seeing Micro Cave 7A of Batman. And this is the fucking laziest name for something that has been put into a fucking comic. And yes, it affects the score, I'm afraid to say. And it was just pointed out as across town, as like the place. And it's stupid. It's lazy. Be more creative. At the moment, it feels like you've got the creative bone of a goldfish that's being cooked in water. Just saying it bluntly. Alright. But I am still happy that we did get those locations. Time, as to when times were taking place. As you can see, there was actually time mentioned, but that time that was shown there was actually in relation to a bomb that was set to go off, but not actually pointing out sort of like the time of night when this was occurring, which again would not hurt the story. It would actually help it. Moving into the cast of characters. In this, we of course got the main character being Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, Huntress, to which they were actually both studying the work together in this story. We of course had Mr. Worth. We of course had the appearance of Penguin. We had Nakano back once again, Oracle, and of course Mr. Vile, who is going to make a full appearance, I think, in the next couple of issues. And we'll get to see what his special ability is. Mr. Viles. And my overall rating for the story of this is 6.5 out of 10. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.